Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to crisis management, well-being, business continuity, COVID, resilience, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community plan for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Now, today, we're going to talk once again. I've got another returning guest, Gavin Freeman. Gavin, welcome back.
Thank you, Alex. It's lovely to be here.
And we're going to talk about two different things today. The first being, or part one, I guess we could say, is well-being and mental health, because we touched on that the last time you and I talked. And part two, we'll talk about really the gap in C-suite training.
Sounds like a wonderful plan.
Now, just in case somebody didn't listen to the other episode of Crisis Management and Psychology, could you take a quick minute and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Love to, absolutely. And thanks for having me again. So Gavin Freeman's my name. I've been a psychologist now for well over 20 years. I started off my career specializing in high-performing teams and individuals, worked with our Australian Olympic team, went to a few Olympic Games, really focusing on how do individuals perform in the moment. Once I finished that career and transitioned into my next one, really took that same philosophy around thinking about the moments in time that individuals have to perform in, and then looking at ways of helping them build their level of mental toughness, resilience. And the fact I have a particular phrase that I like to talk about. For me, the difference between good and great is the ability to perform consistently under pressure. And it's that consistent piece and then the under pressure piece that's interesting, because I think anyone can perform. It's about being able to do it over and over again, and then under significant amount of pressure. And I think crisis really brings that to the forefront. Many individuals out there will operate in their normal day-to-day life, BAU, and never really experience a full, true crisis and never really test themselves. Athletes, we see athletes happening all the time. They live in that world, but in the corporate world, it's not something that comes about all that often. COVID has really turned that on its head and given us great insights around how people have responded to a variety of unprecedented situations.
Yeah, COVID, I think, has flipped a lot of thinking and behaviors and practices on its head.
It really has, but it's also highlighted for organizations this whole fact of what we can and can't do. And it really does play into the conversation we want to have today about mental health and well-being, around how we deal with our staff, how we respond to their needs and their requirements and their demands, how we might have to push back in slightly different ways, and then also how we need to adapt to this new way of working when and how organizations decide on their new model. Because every organization is going to have a variety of different models, everything from 100% back at work to 100% not back at work, and everything in between. And I think that it's going to test leaders in a way they've never been tested before, because they've never had to think about the impact on the person in their decision-making process and how they are making decisions. Whereas in the past, it was you just come to work. And if someone was having a bad day, you kind of just sent them home. And you said, take a day off, or have a stress leave, or take a few extra days of leave. And that was generally the way of dealing with it in the past, was allow somebody else to deal with it, or at least allow the person to go home and deal with it on their own. We've seen a significant change now, and the new models are going to require staff to recognize that they're as responsible for their staff members in the office as they are back in their home work environments. And that adds a layer of complexity that I don't think many businesses have actually really thought through.
No, it's interesting because, as we're talking now about well-being and mental health, there was recently here in Canada, there was a survey done of employees and people going back to the office, and organizations that were kind of mandating people to go back to the office. And it turned out that 53% of people said, if I'm mandated to go back to the office for my own well-being, I am quitting.
That
and that's just quitting, not the rest of the percentage will say, I will put up with it, or I will fight it and start finding a new job. But 53% said, I will quit. right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think that's indicative. And look, I'm seeing things similar to that around the world. Here in Australia, we're having very similar kind of conversations. It's not surprising when individuals when they get feedback that enables them to see the art of the impossible, and then we demonstrate that the impossible is possible, to now suddenly go back, that's a real hard ask. And I think organizations are having to not just say we've got an office, they're actually having to demonstrate for the very first time the true benefit of why that individual needs to spend an hour or two commuting from their workplace into the office, missing out on all those things we've suddenly realized we now can see: kids, spending time with loved ones, elderly parents, even just having an extra hobby. With that extra time we had not commuting has given us opportunity to see what the art of the impossible is for us. And now we're saying, well, I want to be able to do this. I want to have my cake and eat it too.
Yeah, well, it's as though the door has been opened, the can of worms has been opened, and it seems some organizations now, I won't say all, but some organizations want to try and push everybody back in, close the door and close that can of worms. I don't think we can now.
No, I don't think we can, and I don't think we want to either. I think that old style of leadership being you're not performing unless I can see you performing, has very much disappeared. At least in the environments that you and I probably operate in. That philosophy is gone. Obviously, there's some businesses that can never do that. Manufacturing businesses, production-based businesses, they just simply can't do that. If you've got large amount of stock, if you run an airline, you can't tell. The air stewards, the air staff can't work from home. They're going to have to get on a plane. So there are clearly some businesses. The bigger challenge, I think, are the businesses that have hybrid work situations where you have the manufacturing staff, as an example, having to come in because of plant and equipment, and then you've got the support staff who are able to work from home. So you've got the same business, and you've got half or a percentage of staff who can work from home and a percentage who physically just can't. And that in of itself can, for some, I think those are the businesses that are going to struggle the most, because they're going to have to send out very different messaging to their businesses. The finance businesses, the marketing businesses, the advertising businesses, they're ones where everybody can work from home. They'll have it a little bit easier because they'll only have to manage one message out to their staff.
I think the hybrid approach to those organizations that you just mentioned, there's a danger of creating an us and them mentality, right?
Yeah, absolutely, without a doubt. And it will come through, because generally the us being those that are staying, we're here, and the them being, you people working from home. There will, and I've already seen it happening here. I'm working with some organizations who are in that exact space. There is that, nothing's changed for the group internally. They've not, they still have, they timed when they get their break. They only get 5 minutes at one point in time, or a lunch break at 10. And then whereas the other group can take lunch whenever they like and go and have a cup of coffee. They're starting to really have to be very clear around managing that message. So I don't think that's going to be the tricky one, and it's going to be hard. And back to our topic today, which is how do you manage then the mental health of your individuals through this period of time where we're trying to resettle everybody. And there's lots of old theories out around forming, storming, norming, and conforming, around how teams kind of come together. And in a way, we're sort of doing a variation of that now, where individuals are having to reconnect in different ways and work out what's right. And that's, for some people, they're legitimately going, look, I don't know what's right for me. And there's others who are saying, I do know what's right, and I've got it, I'm going to set it down. So look, it's interesting, it's fascinating, it's exciting. I think it's giving businesses opportunities to explore new ways of doing things. That innovation curve is going to be really pushed. The opportunity, the production possibility frontiers are really going to be pushed for some organizations. I actually think we're going to see an increase in productivity. I think the organizations who embrace this are going to be rewarded for the most part, rewarded from their staff who enable this environment. I think the ones who push back and kind of your description of, get back behind that door and I'm going to slam it back closed, I think they're going to do irreparable harm to both their internal reputation and also ultimately to productivity. Because you see, I can fake a behavior for a period of time. I can pretend like I'm happy, for a period of time. And you may not know, I might be very miserable today, Alex, but I can pretend for the next hour or so, 45 minutes we're going to be chatting. But I'm not going to be able to do that if you and I are chatting every single day. There's just no way I'll keep that up. So we can fake behavior for small periods of time. We can't fake what's going on inside, and ultimately the body and the brain will always want to be congruent. So what I'm thinking and what I'm behaving ultimately has to create a level of congruency, and the body is always striving for what we call homeostasis. So I will be as good as I need to be for the environment that I'm operating in, which is the basic fundamental of what homeostasis is. So if I'm meant to be a certain level of fitness, my body will give me that certain level of fitness if I train it. And then you match that with kind of this behavioral and mental congruency, and what you get is hopefully a well-functioning human being who can walk up and down the stairs. When organizations start to push and pull on those levers, the individual is going to push back. And you're going to see it in some weird and wonderful ways that we haven't really recognized before, because I think the power has shifted a little to the person, less on the business.
Well, let's take this a little step further, because we've both mentioned the terms well-being and mental health here.
Yeah.
And reading some articles and listening to some other people, the terms seem to be interchangeable. But I think there's a difference between the two. So at least I think there is. Is there a difference between mental health and well-being?
Look, yes and no. I think fundamentally that they are interlinked. To have well-being, you need to have good mental health, because, as I was saying before, the way we behave and the way we think have to be congruent. It's kind of like, do you remember the old saying where you've got to walk the walk and talk the talk?
Mm-hmm.
If I flip that on its head a little bit and I said to you, Alex, I want you to think to yourself that you are the most fantastic, productive, human being on the planet, right? But what I want you to do is I want you to drop your head. I want you to kind of slug your shoulders forward. I want you to slouch, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, part of you is going to go, but you're asking me to think like I'm a superstar, but you're telling me to behave like I'm a loser. So those two don't mix. So eventually one of two is going to change, and it depends. For some people, the behavior will take over, and you'll go, well, I'm acting like I'm depressed. I'm acting like I'm upset. So I'm going to start thinking that way. And whatever Gavin told me to do, that's just nonsense, and I'll get rid of that. But the reverse happens. So if I say to you, shoulders back, chest up, nice and proud, but think to yourself, I'm a complete loser, I'm a failure in life, that's not going to work. You're going to feel a disconnect. So for me, the mental health is around the way we understand, the way we interpret our world. It's around our self-talk, the self, the little duck that quacks in the back of our head. It's about our self-esteem, so the way we believe in our ability to do things, our confidence, all that to me is built up in mental health. So that's kind of, I can control it. The well-being then becomes the manifestation of that. So how do I act? How do I behave? How do I engage? When we see people who suffer from levels of anxiety, right? There's the mental health side, which is their thought processes, but then there's the behavioral side of they can't go outside, they don't engage with people, they don't have social interactions. So to me, that's part of the well-being. But I've seen people interchange them as well, and I think most people out there will probably use the words interchangeably. I certainly do at times. But for me, there is that subtle difference between kind of what's going on up here and then what am I doing? How am I, what am I putting out there? The nice thing about it, though, is that if you do separate the words out and take my definition of it being mental health being kind of our internal monologue, and then the well-being sort of being how it all presents itself, is that we can attack both sides if things aren't going well. So we can look at the way you're engaging with people. We can look at your social interactions. We can look at your social skills and help develop those, even if inside our own head we're feeling like, oh, I don't want to see people, I don't want to talk to people. We can build that skill up and then kind of hope it helps. And the same way goes the other way around. We might be out there engaging with people, but just not internalizing it really well and having sort of negative thoughts. We can just work on the negative thought side of things, come up with different strategies, build a DIMS and SIMS model, which is a fancy way of working out, what's the danger in me, where's my danger side, and what's the safety in me, the SIMS model. What makes me feel safe. So I think we can use it in that way. And it also means that organizations can do that. So they can recognize that there's ways that we can help people deal with their own self-internal monologues. And then there's also ways we can help promote the broader well-being, social interactions. I actually think the biggest challenge organizations are going to face going forward is not the internal side, because people have to deal with it themselves. It's the well-being and the external side, being the social anxiety I think some organizations are going to see happening within their people. We don't know how to communicate with each other anymore. We've been separated so much that when we come back together, I think some have just gone collided and others have gone, ooh, I don't want to go anywhere near you because, it's no way, Alex.
Well, that brings up an interesting question then. If organizations need to deal with this or look at it, and when I say that, I mean everybody, because executives are going to be the same way. Even the people in HR who are maybe tasked with doing this are going to feel the same way. But how do you deal with it when you've got introverts who weren't doing that great in the office are now doing great at home, and extroverts who are doing great in the office but not doing as great as home? How do you deal with the introvert and extrovert component?
So just to be really clear, most people interpret those two words wrong. So introverts and extroverts are not the difference between who's on the table and who's not on the table when you're at the pub. So it's about being really clear around, first of all, and I know what you're meaning by that. So there's extroverted people versus introverted people. The actual definition, for those of you who are interested, introverts and extroverts really come down to the way we think and where we draw our energy from. So your introverted person is an internal thinker, draws our energy internally, comfortable with their own thoughts. Extroverted people tend to draw their energy from others. So ironically, while I'm here, I stand on a stage. If I would be on a stage every day of my life, if I could, I'm an introvert. So I'm not actually not an extrovert in the slightest. So I draw all my energies internally. At a party, I'm usually sitting in the corner, but put me on a stage and I'm loving it. But that's where I'm drawing my energy from. So it comes down to, if you use that definition now, then it's saying, okay, how are we going to provide the connection for people in different scenarios? So for those introverted people who like the internal thinking through, how do we allow them that space to do that? And the extroverted type people who need that energy coming in from others, whether it's the stepping over my desk and doing something and just saying hi, it's the tap on the shoulder, hey Alex, let's go for a quick walk and I just want to bounce something off you. Those are the challenges. So I think it's about understanding to some degree flows of energy, and then for organizations trying to put in place different mechanisms that support it. Are they going to get it wrong? Absolutely. Do we actually know how to do it? I don't think we do yet, because how do I replicate the quick tap on the shoulder, hey Alex, let's have a quick cup of coffee, I just want to bounce an idea off you, but I'm at home? Because that doesn't work. The setting up of online meetings doesn't work. I think what we're going to start to see is new technologies coming out that enable it. So for example, you and I are communicating on Zoom. This has become the replica of a business table, right? You're on one side, I'm on the other. Yes, on the screen we look next to each other, but that keeps throwing my poor brain out because we're facing each other. We don't have cameras that enable eye-to-eye contact. You're looking at me, but that's because you're disciplined and you've learned how to do it. If you watch my eyes, I'm actually looking at you, even though my camera's there. Yeah. So that's me looking at the camera, but now I can't see you. So I deviate and then I come down. I think we're going to see technology that's going to help with that. I'd love it if the camera was in the middle of my screen, because then I could literally look at you and be seen like I'm looking at you. So we'll make that. And I think look, for those techie people out there, that was my idea, and I own the worldwide patents for that. Anybody takes that idea and builds on it, Alex, we've got that idea down pat. I think what we need to now build on is different types of technology. So I saw a piece of tech just a program the other day called Around, and it's very different to Zoom. So it's not the little square box, it's a little circle, and you see the person's face sitting up in the top of your screen. It feels different. It feels like I'm working on something, you're there, and I can kind of connect with you if I need to, and then put you on mute if I don't need you there. So I think we're going to see different forms of technology that's going to support it. But I also think the other way we need to develop, and this is probably the most important point for organizations out there, is we've got to learn to engage with our people in different ways to gather information from them. We can't just assume we're going to know what we need to do. We've got to, and I'm not talking about the surveys that go out or the pulse survey. We're actually going to have to train our leaders to engage with their staff at different levels, different emotional levels, different psychological kind of mindset levels. That's where I see organizations having to do the upskilling, is training leaders on how to engage, different forms of communication, because that's going to give us all the information we need to then build these new models, whatever they might look like.
Well, we only have 2 minutes left, and I did want to ask one quick question. Yep. So I guess it'll be a marathon answer. As an employee, what if I know one of my colleagues is suffering? What can I do to help that person?
Yeah, and look, we have something in Australia which I think is fantastic. I hope there's similar programs, and I know there are several programs in the US and Canada. We have these programs called EAPs, Employee Assistance Programs. It comes down to levels of comfort. Obviously, if you see somebody struggling, I would like to think and hope that most people will go up and engage and ask. But the reality is, Alex, if I come up to you and I go, hey, mate, how's everything going? There's a good chance you're just going to say you're fine. And you're just going to, and we as people will then accept that. I'll take it on face value. So how do we engage to that next level? It's about building trust. Fundamentally, it's about building trust. You will not share with me your story unless we can build some level of trust. So, if you're seeing somebody, if it's somebody who you haven't built that level of trust with, then you need to build it, and you've got to do that slowly. So that's about engaging slowly. It's about inquiring. One of the ways we do know that kind of works, and it does work to build trust with new people, is rather than inquiring about them, share about yourself. Share your own story. It's very powerful, and we do this in leadership development as well. When we teach leaders to share their own story, particularly around why they're a good leader, why people should be led by them, and I know we're going to talk about that in the second half. But there's that level of sharing. If I let you know that I've been struggling a little bit with this whole COVID thing and working from home, there's far more likely for you to say, "Oh, so have I," and then you can engage in the conversation around, so what's your experience been like, and so on and so forth. So I think it's about trust, and I think if we actually start about sharing a little bit from ourselves, we'll find we build that bridge much quicker.
And on that, we've come to the end of our first segment. We're talking today with Gavin Freeman about well-being and mental health, and we'll be right back with part 2. So that was the end of part 1 with my discussion on mental health and well-being with Gavin Freeman. Join us for part 2, where we talk about the gap in C-suite training and crisis management. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.